Well, greetings, friends. I hope you've been enjoying these weekly Bible study installments where I've been asking someone inside our church, someone outside our church, what in the Bible has been mattering to you lately? It's just been great conversations. Such a timely thing. This week, I thought I would reach out to two people. One is Lawrence McCleskey, Bishop McCleskey, who was our senior pastor here many years ago. Back in the 90s, and he's retired now, but has continued to be a good friend and still a thoughtful theologian. And I also reached out to Sarah Simmons, who is one of our great youth staff doing tremendous work with our teenagers. I hope you'll enjoy this installment of our weekly Bible study. So, Lawrence McCleskey, Bishop McCleskey, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for asking me, James. It's great.
I feel I should, out of reverence, call you Bishop McCleskey, but I've always known you as Lawrence.
Well, one of the nice things about being retired is I've had my name back now for 14 years.
I remember shortly after you became bishop, you came back into something at our conference, and I remember you saying, "My jokes are funnier now than they've ever been before."
Oh yeah, the jokes got funnier, the sermons got better.
But you were with us at Myers Park back when
91, June of 91 till August of 96. 5 years.
There's an oil portrait of you in the hallway done by Joyce Gossett, one of the. She's gone on to glory, but one of our great artists, painters.
Joyce was wonderful painter. That was a wonderful experience. And her husband, Frank, who also has gone on to glory, served a term as chair of the board while I was there. I loved both of them dearly. They were just great folks.
We had their kids and some grandchildren and great grandchildren of theirs in our church. That's still a great family for us. So our question with folks, we're asking interesting people, what in the Bible's been mattering to you lately and why?
That's a great question, and I've thought about it since you shared it with me a little earlier. I have found myself spending more time with the Psalms than anything else lately. Back during the pandemic, I got started using the Psalms in early morning reading, and actually did something I hadn't done in years. I read straight through them a couple of times, one or two a day.
Yeah.
And I've found, for a variety of reasons, that the wisdom there is just incredibly beautiful and important, I think, for what we're living through now. The older I get, the more interested I have become in the religion of Jesus rather than religion about Jesus. And trying to get into that and understand it better, one of the questions I've asked myself is, where was Jesus's grounding? Where was Jesus's faith base? And that took me to the Psalms. Now, I know that if you read through the Gospels, you find references to a number of Old Testament passages and things that are attributed to Jesus. But Jesus worshiped regularly. We know that because we're told in that wonderful story in Luke, he went to the synagogue as was his custom. Those little words have always struck me as important, as was his custom. And surely the Psalms must have been a big part of that. So I found the Psalms, and in particular, it's kind of interesting. I'm not the student of the Psalms that you are. You've studied them and written about them much more than I. But I've read that some scholars say that the 90th Psalm is the oldest writing in all of Scripture. I don't know if that's true or not, but it echoes that some of the words of Moses in Deuteronomy when he was giving his farewell address before his own death. But I found the 90th Psalm to be particularly meaningful. And then moving out from that, others. But the idea, Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. I don't preach much anymore, but I've done a number of memorial sermons in the last couple of years. And every time I've done one in the last 2 years, I've been drawn to the 90th Psalm. Because it seems to me that it is a place to be grounded. We preachers, we've lived in a lot of houses over the years, but what we learn is that it's not the house that makes the home. It's the relationships, it's the connections, it's the deeper kind of stuff of who we are and who we are together that define home for us. And so that 90th Psalm, which grounds us in a relationship, which grounds us in something beyond ourselves, and that may be for me one of the biggest things about it these days. As I look at what's going on in the world, it seems to me that so much of what people get all excited and worked up about is what they perceive to be the truth, what we perceive to be the truth, what I perceive to be the truth. The 90th Psalm and the Psalms as a whole remind me that truth is a lot more than my perception. It's a lot more than my experience. It's a lot more than the way I think the world ought to be. And that pushes you to mystery. It pushes you to stretching your mind. It pushes me to having my own assumptions challenged. And it pushes me back to sort of the primal questions of my own source and grounding and what that means. So that's part of it, the Psalms. Another part of the Psalms, and I'll just keep talking if you don't stop me with it.
That's great. Keep going, Lawrence.
Margaret says if somebody asks me what time it is, I'll tell them how to make a watch. So that's here we go. Another thing about the Psalms that seems to me important is that well, that's what happens at this age. You lose your train of thought. More than my perspective, more than my experience. I had a thought, James, and I don't know where it went.
Well, I'll say something while you work on that. So I'm going to turn my camera here and show you something that is amazing.
Okay. And then it's back, so that's good. Turn the camera.
Yeah. So what that is if you know the St. John's Bible, they came out with this illuminated, beautiful Bible with artwork.
Yeah.
That is the 90th Psalm, the page of the 90th Psalm from the St. John's Bible. Now, why do I have such a thing framed? There are two reasons. One is when I was at Duke, I did my PhD dissertation on the 90th Psalm. Right. And I joke, people say, what was the name of that? I say, More Than You Would Ever Want to Know About Psalm 90. Which is true. So it was always special to me when my mother-in-law, Jean, whom you knew, when she turned 80, somehow I got this great idea to give this to her. Because in the Psalm, it says this thing about the length of our life is 70 years, or if by reason of strength, 80. She was turning 80, right? So I was like the greatest son-in-law ever. But when I gave it to her, she said, I guess I'll die one day and you can have this back. And there it is.
There it is.
That's a psalm that has meant a lot. I do think, you mentioned Jesus in the Psalms. I read this somewhere years ago that Jewish boys and girls at the time of Jesus, their mother would have taught them the Psalms from memory.
Oh, wow.
So there you have Mary, Jesus' little boy, teaching him, and he knows the Psalms from memory. So when he's under duress, like on the cross, he doesn't pray spontaneously. He prays the Psalm. My God, why have you forsaken me? Or into your hands I commend my spirit. And I've done that same discipline, Lawrence, and I commend it to people. Pray through the Psalms. I was told by my doctoral advisor not to do anything scholarly, but just pray one psalm in the morning, one in the evening. Just do that every day and just keep cycling through. And that's been a bedrock for me in my devotional life.
I knew you had done your PhD dissertation on the Psalms. I didn't know it was specifically on the 90th Psalm. That's amazing. And what a wonderful gift to come back to you, the gift that returns.
It was funny. I loved that thing so much, and she probably could detect that when I gave it to her.
Yeah. Well,
so you get this back.
Yeah.
So I think about her all the time when I see it, of course.
Exactly. Well, and my thought that I had lost a minute ago came back through that. Another thing about the Psalms is, and I think this is tremendously important in the world we're in today, the inclusivity of the Psalms. I'm not talking about picking some issue, because we got plenty of issues that are inclusive, exclusive stuff all around about them. But the Psalms have a universality to them. The 24th, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Now, play with that idea a little bit. And what is the fullness thereof? Well, if it's got anything to do with human beings, that suggests something to me about the importance of all of us and the significance of inclusiveness for all of us. The Psalms have a sense of transcendence about them, and one of the I get so weary these days of religion that assumes that what I think and what I'm telling you is the ultimate truth. And the ultimate truth is so much more than that, so far beyond anything that I can imagine, or any of us, one of us can imagine. There's no politician who's got the ultimate truth wrapped up in a political party. There's no denomination that's got the ultimate truth wrapped up in that denomination. We all pray and hope that we approximate it in some small way. But the Psalms take us far beyond the poverty of our own limited understanding and experience. And just to be reminded of that, and to be sort of constantly lifted out of that. And I don't know, I find myself thinking more about that kind of thing these days. But the big idea, the idea of transcendence, the idea of everything, everybody belonging to God, the idea that God is not just my little personal home, but the dwelling place of all creation, that is big enough to transform the world. And
and God doesn't want truth to be some kind of blunt instrument that we use to beat up other people or judge other people. I read this the other day. Sir Isaac Newton said something, who was pretty smart. He said that all our knowledge it's like there's an ocean, and we're just wading into the little waves that are lapping up. Like that's all. There's so much more. So there's something in truth that's about kind of humility and curiosity and listening more than what we've got figured out. It's just beautifully put.
Yeah, well, I think that's so important these days, because there's too much limited thinking posing as truth.
Yeah.
And, anyway, the Psalms, that's sort of where I've been here in the last couple of years, really.
It's a good place. I don't know how much longer either one of us has to live, but I mean, it's a good place to be. St. Augustine, you may know this, when he was in his latter days, he asked his family to print out Psalms and in big letters and paste them on the wall around his bed. So as he lay dying, he could look up and see and read and pray Psalms. I love it. It's such a powerful image.
Yeah. And in a way, I think people kind of know that somewhere deep down. You may have had this experience. I've had it more times than I can remember. Be officiating at a funeral service and start reading the 23rd Psalm, which I always read in those services in the King James Version.
Yeah.
It's just the beauty of that language. But start reading that and suddenly become aware that people in the congregation are mouthing it along with me. They know it. And
at your former church, Myers Park, we printed in the bulletin and we read it as a congregation at every funeral. People don't look down and read. Right? They know it. They look up and they be moved to tears. It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah. There's something in us somewhere that longs, I think, for that deeper significance. And we get so sidetracked by the less important stuff.
Lawrence, that's beautifully put. Thank you so much for taking some time to share with us today. It's always good talking to you.
Always good talking to you, James. Thanks a lot.
Right. Love to Margaret.
Love to Lisa. Great to see you. Bye.
So, Sarah Simmons, thank you for joining us for our Bible reflection time on Bible Matters. Good to see you. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the invitation, for inviting me to be a part of the conversation.
You've been on our staff how long now?
4 years full time, and 5 summers ago I interned.
Man,
can't believe it's been that long either.
It's incredible. You're doing an incredible job with our middle school youth, and you're in school.
Thank you. Yes, I am at Union Presbyterian Seminary right now. I'm 3 years in, 2 more years to go. But I'm loving every second and enjoying what I'm learning. So.
Well, it's exciting stuff, and they do a great job over at Union. I've taught for them a little bit over time. And
you have.
Anyhow, yeah. So our, the question that we're asking various people is, what in the Bible has been mattering to you lately?
Yeah, a lot, but I really
good answer.
Yeah. But it was hard to try to, narrow in kind of what has been sticking out to me and staying with me lately. In youth ministry, we've been spending a lot of time this year talking about mental wellness and how we can, take care of our mental fitness, but also how we can befriend and help people that we walk alongside in everyday life with different coping skills and active listening skills and all of that. And so that, in Holy Week being recently, I have kind of been stuck on this story in Matthew 27 of Judas's suicide. Holy Week is already kind of a dark week. It ends in hope with the resurrection. And, Friday is that kind of gloomy day. But I think what's been sticking with me, and I'm having a hard time sitting with this story, is, mental health is something that we've kind of don't talk about in society. It's kind of something we've skipped over. And I feel like it was kind of something, we don't really talk about in Holy Week either, because it's an uncomfortable conversation. And I'm grateful that our church has been willing to have the conversation this year and to talk about it and make it part of, the regular question. So that's kind of what I've been sitting with lately. It's not a joyful thing, which is why I was struggling to say that this is what has been mattering to me in the Bible, but it's where I'm at.
I mean, the Bible, people forget about this. It'd be easy to make a joke like, the suicide of Judas. That's one of those passages you want to cross stitch and put up on your mantle. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that you wouldn't necessarily cross stitch and put up on your mantle, but the Bible's got everything, right? It's got dysfunctional families. It's got failed marriages. It's got a lot of the Bible characters are liars and cheats. And the Bible has a romantic, kind of erotic love poetry. The Bible's got a lot of cynicism in it. It's got these prayers of, God, why have you abandoned me? Who felt more abandoned by God than Judas, right? I mean, just his despair over it's confusing, right? To think about Judas. Like he's a mixed person, like all of us.
he has some noble motives. Like he seems to want to care for the poor, but then he's got some corruption that's in him. And he just can't go on. I mean, one of the things I think it's important to say this here. Every time that we deal with a suicide, people come to me and they say, that's the unforgivable sin, isn't it? And this is false. I helped write some of the material for our denomination around suicide. The Bible nowhere says that that's the unforgivable sin. People deduce, they string together 8 different verses and say, aha, that must be what it is. Not at all. And if God has compassion on anyone, it's somebody who feels so desolate that they can't even imagine taking the next step, living the next day. And people forget at the Last Supper, Jesus washes Judas' feet, right? Yeah. So say more about just why do you think talking about darkness helps us, but specifically teenagers, adolescents, and what they're going through?
Yeah. Well, a couple of weekends ago during Lent, we actually partnered with Myersburg Presbyterian and offered a mental wellness weekend where we flew in licensed counselor Brian Kuhn from Missouri, and he led us in multiple sessions with different age groups about mental wellness and why this topic matters to God and how it is a faithful conversation. And one of the quotes that stuck with me most that he said is, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. And he also was very wise in the language he chose. He specifically chose mental wellness over mental health because, when you say mental health, it sounds like, there is some sort of, or when you say mental illness, it sounds like there's some sort of sickness. And, when you're healthy, that means you've cured something. Whereas mental wellness, how he kind of described it is, it's an ongoing journey. It's not, you have some good days, you have some bad days, but you're never fully cured, but we can learn how to cope with it. And so that quote stuck with me. If it's mentionable, it's manageable. If we can talk about that darkness, those difficult times, it's something that, again, we can't cure necessarily, but that, it's exactly what Scripture is just embedded in all of Scripture is, when we can share things with our community, and our community can walk with us through these things, our burdens are lighter. Things, I wouldn't say life is easy, but I would say things are easier to handle because, you have a presence around you, a village around you. So yeah.
And we're all such, our whole culture sort of trains us to be, I don't know what the term would be, escape artists, maybe. Right. So we aren't candid with one another. We aren't candid with ourselves. We may not. Sometimes I remember years ago in marital counseling, I was talking to a couple and she kept saying, he won't share with me how he feels. And I looked at him and he said, I don't know how I feel. Like, I love that. Like he wasn't in touch enough with himself to be able to share it with the person closest to him. And so part of Christian community, isn't, smiling and, oh, we're so blessed, we're doing great, right? That's fine. But it should be like the one safe place, right, where we can share our darkest, our most frightening, our most vulnerable, whatever it is, but also learn to get in touch with it ourselves, right? Like, you don't want to go there, go to another party, stay busy. God invites us to be, be still and know that I'm God. People sort of love that verse, but it's, be still, and man, the stuff rattling around in there. But if you can mention it, and then the real art of Christian community, right? It's just, are we willing to listen?
Yeah, I love that idea because sometimes I feel like we keep ourselves so busy because we might be scared of what we may find in ourselves in that
staving it off.
Yeah.
Or we self-medicate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Teenagers do.
Yeah, and that was one of the things we talked about. Brian did gave out a worksheet at the end of every session and walked everyone through kind of what it was and how to use it, but it was kind of a mental wellness check-in, and it you had to rate how much you use these negative coping skills, and then how, what might be some positive coping skills that you have. How do you feel about yourself when you're doing certain things, and to kind of check in with the self-esteem. And yeah, I think too with the community factor, sometimes at least for me, I won't speak for everybody, but sometimes my friends see that I'm not doing well before I see it, because they know me. And they're like, Sarah, you are going at 100 miles an hour. From our conversation, I've heard that you said yes to 10 things. And yeah, I feel like you might be tired, and maybe you should, take a break. Or they'll ask me when in all of that are you going to take some time to be with God, to be still, like you just said,
We're in this together. I see our teenagers, if anything, they're showing the way to the grown-ups in our church. I know at the Moravian Love Feast in December, the youth who spoke, that's what they talked about. Like, I'm having a horrible day. There are people in this group that will listen to me. They will love me. They will lift me up. And it absolutely loved that. And Sarah, thank you for your good thoughts on this and your good work with our adolescents. We're really grateful.
Well, thank you. And if I can just leave everyone with one quote, again, another Brian Kuhn quote from that mental wellness weekend that we had. But he said, if we can talk about suicide, we can talk about anything. So I hope we can be a church that can talk about suicide and anything else.
It's in the Bible.